at the last minute can review it after the fact, or people who want to go deeper and listen to it again have it. But I'm Suzan Brinker. I'm a co-founder of Viv Higher Education. We specialize in integrating content and media strategies to drive enrollment growth. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending this roundtable today. We're really excited. We have a lot of really good stuff to go over, and obviously an amazing panel, which I'll introduce shortly, and everybody will get a chance to introduce themselves. The topic today is the demographic cliff, or what we in higher ed are referring to as the enrollment cliff. Most of you probably know exactly what that is, but just in case somebody among the attendees is a little bit less familiar, the enrollment cliff refers to the fact that in around 2025 to 2026, we will have significantly fewer incoming freshmen in United States higher education institutions. And that is because when the Great Recession started in 2007, 2008, people stopped having as many children. And as much as I don't want to believe that people who were born in 2007 will soon be of college age, that is the case, and there will be fewer of them. And so projections have predicted that the freshman population will decline up to 15%, which is obviously quite significant. And while this is, of course, first and foremost an undergraduate issue, it will trickle down or up to graduate education, professional education, and across any institution of higher education, no matter how selective it is. And so because of that, we have an amazing panel assembled here today that is not just going to speak about undergraduate specific issues, but rather our panel represents a wide variety of colleges and universities, from small liberal arts to private and selective, to large public R1, to regional, to international. And so what I would like to do now is have the panelists introduce themselves briefly. Sabiha, would you be able to start?
Sure. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Viv, for putting it together. I'm really looking to learn more than teaching here, but I think this clip has been at the doorstep of all of us for a few years now, and it's important that we start discussion like sooner rather than later. But one big thing at AU, and for me, I'm the student director of marketing and comms for the School of Public Affairs at the American University. So it's a little different where we our grad enrollment is our main driver for our department, but I did reach out to undergrad admissions to kind of see what they're doing and how grad is doing, because it's being affected pretty much like everywhere. So I do want to discuss that part of it, like how undergrad is getting affected, or how grad enrollment is getting affected by it. But I'm very interested to know and learn what other people are doing too.
Awesome, thank you so much, James.
Hi, yes, I'm James Seidler. I'm the Director of Web Services at Purdue University Northwest. And obviously this is a focus for us. I think that we're trying to focus on how we can provide value to prospective students who are coming in and really persuade them that what we have to offer them is manageable and also will help them advance their goals. And I think a big thing that we'll all see is just trying not to be generic and trying to be specific in how we can communicate well with this audience.
Yeah, Kristen.
Well, hello. Thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. My name is Kristen Gasser, and I'm a web developer, sort of more of a content strategist. I do everything you look at, but none of the development behind the scenes. So lots of SEO work and content strategy, and constantly, just trying to evaluate our websites to make them better. I specifically work in the Ira A. Fulton Schools of Engineering. So that's the Department of Engineering within ASU. ASU is a super gigantic university. I don't know if you know how big we are, but like in engineering this fall, we had 30,000 students. So we're sort of like a huge university in a huge university. And so that's the perspective I'm coming from, is sort of within a department in a larger university.
Thank you so much for being here, Carrie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you to Susan and Audra for organizing this. Looking forward to this conversation. My name is Carrie Herrera-Neeson, and I am the Director of Marketing for the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law here at Arizona State University. Kristen and I just met a few days ago, seeing that we were on this panel, just to show the size of ASU and we talked about keeping in mind that we're quite an anomaly when it comes to this conversation, being the largest public research institution in the US. And the perspective that I bring to this conversation is not only our law student perspective, but also our master's student perspective. So how does that impact our pipeline, as you all, most of you are thinking about the freshman impact, but how does that transition and translate down to, say, 2028, 2029, when they may or may not be ready for law school or graduate programs? So looking forward to the conversation.
Exactly. Thank you. Allison.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Tercio. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Enrollment and Marketing at Sienna College and also an adjunct professor of marketing at the college. Sienna is a small, private, Catholic, regional liberal arts college just outside of Albany, New York, the capital of New York State. And about 85% of our revenue comes from traditionally aged undergraduate students. So you can see the risk that this demographic cliff could be for Sienna College, but we've just completed a strategic planning process and including a new marketing plan, which was also part of my dissertation, my doctoral research. So we are working on it. We're trying to set ourselves up for what's to come.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here too, Allison. And Anthony.
Hi there, my name is Anthony Owen, bringing a different perspective from across the water. I'm based in the UK. I'm the International Marketing Manager for Wrexham Glyndŵr University. And what I've been looking at is find very interesting what's happening in the States. There is a contrasting picture between the States and the UK. We're actually 5% up on enrollments. So we're not seeing the demographic cliff that you're looking for, or not forward to is the wrong word, looking towards in the US. One thing I've seen in doing some research is the main issue demographics, or is it perhaps finance? Because what I've seen is that the biggest hit seems to be so far in your private not-for-profit institutions, where you seem to be seeing 3 times the number of students as far as the drop in students. One thing I thought there may be that finance is an issue after COVID, but then I've looked and seen that online institutions also are seeing a drop. You've got a 9% drop in undergraduates and an 8.2% drop in graduate enrollments online. So obviously online is affordable, it's flexible, so it can't be finance. Is it demographics? One hypothesis I'd like to bring is that it's possibly supply and demand, that universities need to look at changing what they actually give to industry and give to students. So that's something hopefully we can discuss in this session.
Yeah, Anthony, thank you so much for being here. I think it's great to have an international perspective, and obviously you've done your homework and are coming armed with stats, which is never a bad idea. But also your master's thesis or doctoral thesis, I apologize that I don't know which one it is focusing on AI and how to use AI in student recruiting. And we were just talking before we started here today about how ChatGPT has emerged sort of on the scene since we asked you to be on this panel. So we'll be very curious to hear your perspective on all of that. And
Yeah,
so
it'd be great to talk about
what are
it.
you working on? Is it master's or PhD? Sorry.
It's a master's.
Master's, got it. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I'm just finishing off my thesis, and it's about use and adoption of not just AI, but industrial revolution for technology in the recruitment for higher education.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we have 3 segments and we will pose questions for these 3 segments to our panelists today. The first one is really institution-wide. What are you hearing in terms of discussions on the enrollment cliff and demographics? What kind of strategies are emerging that are institution-wide? Allison already mentioned a strategic plan, so those types of things. And then the second segment will be about marketing and enrollment management specifically. So, what audiences, what messages, what tactics are you looking to implement or already implementing? And then number 3, something we in higher education, I think all love to talk about, is organizational culture and a culture of innovation, and what are the blockers to driving change across often complex and siloed university environments. So my role is to ask these questions that we've kind of prepared and be a timekeeper to make sure we get through them all. So we'll see if everyone always answers every question or not. I'll kind of interject when I feel like we need to move on to the next one. But before we go there, I also would love to engage our participants into a quick poll, because very curious to hear, you know, in terms of when you're looking at the enrollment cliff and demographics for our participants and attendees, what is your main focus? Is it undergrad? Are you really looking at the graduate side of things? And maybe that means you're looking more towards 2028 and 2029, but strategies are already emerging how to deal with this. Professional education, so non-degree or certificate-based education. Are you really not able to choose one of those and have to say it's institution-wide, or is it something completely different? Just very curious to see how the roughly 50 people we have right now in our Roundtable webinar fall across those dimensions. So I'm just going to wait a few more seconds so that everyone who wants to gets a chance to vote on this. All right, so it looks like the majority of the 25 people who answered are in undergrad, with about half of the people really focusing on undergrad, and then a pretty even mix of grad, professional, and institution-wide. By the way, as you think of comments, you know, this goes for the attendees, and questions throughout listening, please drop them in the chat. Audra will be monitoring the chat and can answer anything that's easy to answer or logistics related for us. And then Audra will also be monitoring the chat for the Q&A section that we're hoping to spend for the last 10 to 15 minutes engaging in. So let's get started then with the questions. The first question that I have is, what kinds of discussions have you heard at your institutions about the demographic cliff to date, and what strategies are being put in place already to address it? Allison, do you want to start, because you said that's already happening at Sienna College?
Yeah, we spent all of last year really focused in on this topic and got the strategic plan approved by the board in June. So we're, you know, months into starting to implement. And really where we got to for Sienna was a focus on the student experience. You know, we know that you need a really strong brand reputation to thrive with this demographic cliff coming. That seems like a no-brainer. But we also know that we just do not have the kind of budget to advertise our way to that reputation. So what we're doing is really looking at the core student experience, and we're trying to make it something that they want to tell other people about. We're really focused on creating activities and initiatives that drive word of mouth among the students and among our alumni to help shore up our reputation and put us in as strong a position as possible in 2025, 2026, when that demographic cliff is really going to hit.
I bet you're ahead of the game if you compare yourself across institutions in sort of the Northeast that are all going to be heavy hit by this. Do you have any sense of that? It sounds like very intentional and proactive.
It does seem like maybe people don't want to have to face what's coming. You know, it's a really hard thing and something that causes worry and anxiety. So it's understandable if you're not really focused on tackling. It does seem like there's conversations that are really preliminary happening, you know, on LinkedIn and Twitter, like almost like people are just discovering that this is about to come, which is concerning because I care about the industry as a whole. But I'll give you one other thing. I went to American Marketing Association's conference in November, and I went to a session by Google about higher education specific advertising costs. And they were showing that your budget would need to be double what it was in 2019 to keep up with the rising advertising costs and marketing costs that are occurring in higher ed. So we look at that and it's like, yes, we need to do some investing to keep up, but we are just not in a position to double. from 2019. So what else? So if we can't throw more money at it, then what is on the table? And that's really how we got to student experience.
Oh, I love that. By the way, I'm so sorry. I said drop your questions in the chat. I think there's actually a Q&A function that you need to use if you're an attendee and want to ask questions. So sorry about that. And thank you to one of our attendees for flagging that. James, I know you're also at a regional institution and are looking at this from an institutional perspective already. So could you share a little bit about what's going on at Purdue Northwest?
Yes, certainly. So I came to Purdue Northwest about 4 years ago, and really the demographic cliff has been a topic of discussion since I arrived. We're in Northwest Indiana, close to Chicago. We're a regional university, and we're in a region that has seen population decline, frankly, and it continues to expect that. And one area I'd say that has been a focus for us is trying to reach students sort of in our region and in our community who may not be attending college at the same rate as sort of their peers. And some steps we've taken toward that recently have been including recruiting for Spanish-speaking audience. We are endeavoring to become a Hispanic serving institution. We've even added a PNW and Espanol tab at the top of our website to try to communicate with this audience. We also know that we have a very large first-gen population who may not know as much about sort of applying for aid, navigating costs, navigating some of the complexities that come with applying and attending college. So that has been a core focus for us, as well as looking at our paying for college information, looking at how we communicate and share sort of the process, and really trying to convey how manageable it can be and how we can help with that.
I love it. What about ASU? So you have so many students at ASU, and you're also, I think everybody tends to know, one of the most innovative institutions in higher education. So what conversations are happening? Is this even a worry? How is it going to affect you? Kristen and Carrie, I know you're both from ASU, so it's who starts?
Well, I'll chime in and then I can let Carrie add, I suppose, if she wants to. So in my role, at least inside of engineering, we haven't had a lot of discussions about this yet. The way that I feel ASU has been preparing and reimagining itself now for 20 years, since the advent of hiring our new president, who's no longer new. He's been here for 20 years, but I was there when he was hired, and he was just, his vision of creating this new American university has really come into fruition. And I feel like, you know, some of the concerns that were brought up by Anthony about having concerns about the financial difficulty that would take place when fewer people enroll. Certainly we are tuition dependent, but over the course of this, I feel like we're riding this wave of amazingness that has taken place in the last 20 years because we've built up lots of other, I suppose, revenue streams as a university. We have lots of other places that we're able to get funding from, whether it's research expenditures or some of the community building that we've been doing. And so it just really hasn't become a big concern yet. We had sort of a litmus test, I suppose, in the pandemic, and we did not experience a decline in enrollment even during the pandemic, that we continue to have increased enrollment. So I don't know what will happen. Certainly from a percentage perspective, there must be something, but it really, in my world inside of engineering, hasn't been very much of a discussion at this point.
What about on the law side, Carrie?
Yeah, what I can add from that perspective, and before I share law, what I can tell you all to give you some numbers is last fall, ASU as a whole reported record enrollment. So we have over 140,000 students, undergraduate and graduate students, which was an increase compared to fall 2021. So anytime I'm reading about enrollment at ASU, it's record increase, it's record enrollment, largely because a lot of our strategies are future proofing and really getting down to, similar to what Allison was saying, ASU operates on the principle that learning is personal and it's an original journey for each student. So how can we circle the learner? And I use the word learner very intentionally because it's meeting anywhere from 5 years old to someone working who's over 50 who needs to upskill in a certain area. So we're lucky that we have different, we have our academic enterprise, which in normal higher ed speak is the provost's office. We have our knowledge enterprise, which is the research institution. And now we have our learning enterprise, where we have unique partnerships with, just recently launched a partnership with YouTube, where students starting on March 7th, they can take courses and start earning credit that will transfer into their college years. So
On
that's
YouTube.
what, yes, on
Wow.
YouTube. So, but from the law perspective, you'll read that law enrollments are down nationwide. It's been ebbed and flowing since the pandemic, but it's not a significant decline. And as the second oldest profession, people come to law school, sometimes direct from undergraduate, sometimes they come after a full career or after serving in the military. So it's not this essentially direct pipeline in undergraduate. So it's often a moving target each year that we're constantly thinking about how can we create a more personalized experience for individuals who want to learn and become a lawyer and also want to get legal principles, but not be a practicing attorney.
Yeah, very interesting. Sabiha and Anthony, what about your institutions? Is the demographic cliff a term? I mean, Anthony, you already shared that it's not really affecting the UK in the same way, but wondering if it ever comes up in other contexts, especially because you're focusing international. And then also curious to hear about American University and whether it's a topic that is very common. So I'll start with Anthony and then we'll go to Sabiha.
Yeah, okay. I mean, my role is international, so we certainly have a close eye on the US, you know, because we're looking for international students. Some things that I think work well in the UK and differentiate the UK from the US in attracting students. One is our tuition fees and accommodation fees, which are compared to the US relatively low. That's something obviously that you'll find hard to emulate. But the other one I think that works very well in the UK and is a key driver for many students is our use of student satisfaction statistics and employability scores. Okay, so when we promote courses, it's required by UK law that this data has to be displayed on all course pages. And why? Because it allows students to quickly see the return on investment in enrollment. Okay, it also allows us as a university to adapt and respond faster to the student expectations. So students are very keen to see what's the possibility of them getting employment once they finish their course, and also how satisfied our students. It's one thing for universities to tell everybody how great they are. What they want to hear is from the students.
Mm-hmm.
So we publish those statistics on make them very prominent and put them on a regular basis. One quick fix I think universities can do, and this is something which is shockingly bad both in the US and the UK, is lead nurturing. Universities are not good on following up leads. A report from ICEF from last year, give a few stats on that. 1 in 5 student queries are not answered by universities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Only one in 4 prospective students reported any follow-up. So only 25% of students get follow-up. And over a third of students who'd inquired said they would not continue or engage with the university because they hadn't had a follow-up.
Yeah, you're bringing up really important pieces there that I think
So that's
we
a
hear
quick
across
fix.
institutions.
I think
Yeah.
it's a quick fix universities can look at. Another interesting thing, a report by Simpson and Scarborough, which is an agency, comparing higher education with corporate industry. We apparently spend on marketing budget, this is our marketing budget, 56% goes on human resources, whereas in corporate, only 26%. And what's quite shocking as well, only 3% of our marketing budget is spent on MarTech, marketing technology, whereas 27% by corporate is spent on marketing technology. So we can see a few things there that can be addressed by universities if we're looking to sort of turn around how effective we can be in recruiting students.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up, well, these statistics are really great. Thank you so much for sharing them. I also think you're bringing up a really important piece around international, because as the demographics in the United States shrink, we're going to look even more heavily towards international recruitment, but it is going to get harder and harder to compete with the UK and Australia and other locations where accommodations for international students are so much cheaper, but also the quality is quite high. So that's definitely something that's going to be interesting to watch. Sabiha, how about at American University? Is the demographic cliff a topic that you hear a lot about?
Yes, obviously. And it's good to hear from the public university's perspective, because I think private universities get always the first to get hit and the hardest, only because, our applications and RFIs are usually get lower whenever something like this shifts or something big of a happens. When the pandemic happens, thankfully, we did not really see a big drop. If anything, we actually saw increase. I'm pretty sure on our on the side of RFIs, we did good on the side of the numbers and all of it. But after pandemic is gone and there was a Great Recession, great resignation happened, we started seeing that drop. But with demographic cliff, we are having to be more proactive in this sense, only because we know that private will probably be the first one to experience the drop more than the other ones. And the feeder schools that we have, the top feeder schools, even for undergrad, our biggest feeder school is our undergrad. Like for AU's grad programs, our biggest feeder schools is AU undergrad. So if undergrad is dropping, essentially we are all going to drop. Like grad will suffer, and even the other certificates and all kinds of other programs will suffer. So what we did, a big thing that I would say worked for us, was that looking at it on pockets. Like not every region, like I think Allison brought a very good point. Like not every region of the country will struggle the same way comparing to the other ones. So being in Washington, D.C., our main focus has always been DC, Maryland, Virginia, New York. So if Northeast is struggling, we're looking at like Dallas, we're looking at California. We have a regional based recruiter whose real duty is really to look at the California based recruitment and have people have RFIs driving from there to DC. We are looking at right now Houston, where I think it's 16% increase is expected to happen during the demographic shift. So if New York is giving us 20% less and Houston is giving us 16% more, it made more sense for us to have someone, a recruiter, who's going to reach and have their efforts in Houston and in the Dallas area more. So looking at those pockets and exploring those avenues have been very, I would say, fruitful for us. Another thing, I know, Suzan, you mentioned the international student. I was an international student too, but with that, this year we did struggle with visas and all of it. With international students, that's a big factor. Right. So we changed the strategy a little bit this spring, and I know this year would be big on looking at the countries where the GDPs are high. So even if we are still bringing the international students to kind of fill in those gaps, we want to make sure that they have the high GDP, they can afford the education at AU and go back and have a good career without any kind of struggle with visas, because with US H-1B has been an issue for the last couple of years. So that's been one strategy that we have been really trying to explore, or even looking at vendors who can give us those leads that would be really regionally based, but even international, if we have to need those to fill in those gaps of numbers that we'd be seeing the drops from.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you. So in my research preparing for this panel, I looked at what happened the last time there was a demographic cliff, and when it was projected and what actually happened. And as we know, demographic cliffs are sort of a cause and effect play between things that happened 20 years prior. So after the baby boom of the 1950s and 60s, birth rates declined again. So there was a similar demographic cliff projected for the 1980s. And what actually happened instead is that the cliff didn't actually happen, because while the population of high school graduates actually did decline as expected, at the same time, the percentage of high school graduates who chose to attend college increased. And this was largely due to sort of tectonic shifts in the labor market that put a higher value on a college degree. So looking at that, you know, a hopeful perspective offers itself, you know, could something similar occur, or something different that has the same effect is that the cliff actually doesn't happen. So I'm super curious to hear from all of you, you know, what you think that might look like if so, and specifically, you know, looking at closer collaboration between industry and academia and whether that might have some sort of saving effect on many institutions. James, I know you had a perspective on that when we prepped a little bit.
Yeah, I could speak to that. So almost like Sabi has said that different regions are experiencing this differently. We can see at PNW that different programs in different academic areas are experiencing the demographic cliff differently. And sort of something we're emphasizing as we move forward is quality. That's something that our chancellor often talks about. And an area where I'd say industry is tied into this is we've had a number of sort of a senior design center, a bioscience innovation building for nursing and biology that we've built often in partnership with industry partners that gives our students a chance to work in a high quality program. It gives them a chance to do sort of hands-on career relevant work. And it also builds some of these industry ties that can play into sort of internships and starting their career later. So we've seen success in sort of partnering to build these types of experiential offerings at PNW. And that's something that we obviously look to emphasize with prospective students to share the type of experience they can get.
Yeah, awesome. Any other perspectives on that? Sabiha, what about
if I can add on to it, like partnerships for us, I think looks a little different only because, like I said, it's a School of Public Affairs. So we really focus on the placement after, like, we want to make sure the students are placed in good places in DC, because one big thing, I think, aspiration wise, we do want to make sure they understand they're getting the education in DC. So getting a master's or even an undergrad in public affairs and getting to experience in Washington, DC is a big factor for us, a big unique selling proposition that we want to, the value proposition that we want to promote in our marketing or any kind of, recruitment areas. But I think working with the industry, as in like public affairs, community partnerships, and really working with DC-based partnerships, the DC interns, and like James mentioned, that has been very helpful for us, only because that, and even them working with the faculty and the research before they even graduate, that helps them to have a career before they even get the degree. That I think is very important element for someone to get the master's or undergrad, so they know that what career outcome they can achieve by being at American University. So that demographic shift and really trying to get the students somewhere where they should be is important to have those, like in terms of having those relationships with the industry and the community overall. And that will, obviously help tighten the collaboration regardless of the demographic cliff or not.
Thank you. I think ASU probably has a vast number of industry partnerships and collaborations with industry. Kristen and Carrie, do you expect that to in some ways also help offset any effects that the demographic cliff might have on your already massive institution?
Yeah, I know for engineering, industry partnerships is just huge. We work with a lot of industry partnerships, all the way from funding undergraduate research, all the way through graduate research, all the way through, we have lots of programs, for example, for undergraduate students that a company comes to us with a problem, a student group will work on it, they will produce a product, or they'll produce a solution for them, and that research is all funded by that organization, and then they benefit from it. So we're constantly making ties in the community, which is something ASU really focuses on, is displaying and establishing and building their value to the local community, to the state of Arizona, to the different companies that build in Arizona. So, just speaking from the engineering level, our industry partnerships are massive. And then those same industry people come back and they participate in our career fairs, and they give internships to our students, and lots of good things come from that. And I see that reflected, and maybe Carrie would want to say more, but I see that same approach, which is baked into our vision and baked into our charter at the ASU level, with all the corporate partnerships that are happening there too. It's a really, really, really strong influence. And now we have TSMC is building a semiconductor manufacturing plant in Arizona. We're getting hooked in with that. We're getting hooked into a lot of partnerships, even with Mexico, doing a lot of semiconductor and microelectronics work as well. So it's a very strong drive, especially in engineering, to build those partnerships out. But Carrie, you can probably say more too about ASU.
Yeah, part of the unique position that I've worked with our corporate engagement and strategic partnerships in a previous role at ASU. So when they brought on Zoom as a partner, as a technology partner at the university, that's of course impacting students to enable them to have access to technology, even having a lab on campus to engage with and work with that organization. What I can say from the law perspective and how ASU's design aspirations come into play is one of the big design aspirations is leverage our place. So our downtown Phoenix campus, where the law school is based, we're steps away from the courthouse, we're steps away from law firms, and that's very intentional, not only for the law school, but our nursing program, our journalism program is also here because we're right next door to hospitals, we're right next door to news studios and newsrooms. So having that be very intentional to make it easy for students to get hands-on internship experience, gain experience in professional settings and contexts to build their career while they're a student, that's a huge tenet of ASU and of these individual departments here on various campuses.
Yeah, that is really interesting. There's so much going on the industry partnership side. Probably across the entire university, there are kind of pockets of individual partnerships by college, and then there are institutional-wide partnerships. Just keeping an eye on the time, I'd like to move on to the last question for this institution-wide section, and I would like for Anthony to answer this one because it directly correlates with his research that he's doing. And Anthony, you had kind of brought this up when we were prepping, that the enrollment cliff might be veiling much larger threats to higher education coming from AI, as we already discussed, but also from the fourth industrial revolution. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, as I touched on a little bit earlier, I think that the cyclical ebb and flow of demographics could be hiding a more vital concern. Okay, I think many institutions are neglecting to see what can be an existential threat from that of supply and demand. Basically, what we're looking at there, looking at the labour side, a thing I'll mention here is that when Industrial Revolution 4 was officially announced in 2016 at the World Economic Forum, they also stated that 65% of today's primary school children will eventually work in jobs that don't yet exist. Okay, the question there is higher education flexible enough to meet this new influx of required skills? Can we do that? Problem we have is, I think that at the moment, industry doesn't see higher education as really stepping up to the mark on this. And I think industry is moving away from full-time degrees, from a university, which is essentially, when we're talking about Industrial Revolution 4, higher education also, or education also has a parallel, which we're moving now into Education 4. Currently, we're in what's called Education 3, and this hasn't changed since the 1600s. The way that we teach hasn't changed since the early 1600s. We have a group of students sitting in front of a teacher in a lecture hall. They all move ahead at the same pace. That happened in the 1600s. We haven't really changed on that. Industry wants things that are different. Industry doesn't want an expensive traditional degree. Okay, what they're looking for is more than that. What they want is a marketing graduate leaves, but also they want that marketing graduate to be able to do data analysis, to do coding, be able to do from day one, to be able to do Google AdWords, Google Analytics. These are micro skills, okay? And what's happening, these micro credentials are starting to come through. So companies are looking for that. What are companies doing? They think HE isn't really providing that. So they're setting up their own in-company institutions. They're using MOOCs, they're using in-house training, and they're encouraging people not to go to university. They're encouraging young people to start and be trained within the company, so it meets the company skills needs. Okay, so what's emerging is this thing that companies are looking to take on people without education, or what they look for from education are things that are more geared towards their needs. And these needs are very flexible and very dynamic. Okay, so this is where IR4 comes in, Industrial Revolution 4. It's going to be big. Okay, ChatGPT is just an introduction into it. Okay, they talk about the change being equal to life before the motor car and after the motor car.
Mhm.
Okay, it offers a whole host of opportunities, but also a lot of threats as well, if you don't take on board the changes that are needed. Things that very quickly an institution can look at adopting is chatbots, automated chatbots. Many institutions still have manual run chatbots. Those close at 5, 6, 7 o'clock whenever the institution closes.
Or no chat box at
Or
all.
no chatbot. There's another one. Automated chatbots. It's machine learning. It develops itself. In the end, you can actually have a chatbot that can take a person from initial inquiry all the way through to enrollment, if you're willing to trust the chatbot to do that, which is one of the issues we have to come up with when we're looking at artificial intelligence and IR4. Other things it can do, which is what industry is looking for, it can personalize courses for students. Instead of them just going on a basic marketing course, it can see what type of industry that person wants to go in. It can analyze the data on potential students, including their academic history, their interests, their career goals, and it can create a personalized communication and recommendation for programs. These are the things that what's going to happen in education. It can streamline application processes. When you've got thousands and thousands of applications coming in and you're sifting through applications, it can show you, it can prioritize the applications and show you which are the most likely to not just become successful enrollments, but be successful in the courses also. You've also got such things as reference analysis. If you're doing credibility interviews and things, you can have videos, and it does soft skills. It'll look at the features of people. It'll look at how they're acting, and it will give you additional information about the potential for that prospective student. It can enhance your outreach and your marketing tasks in your emailing, in your social media. We've already seen with ChatGPT, it can write the content for you. How good it is at the moment?
Oh, go ahead.
Is something to see. But certainly there are things that need to be looked at. There are challenges. One of the big challenges with institutions is integration. There is the phrase that goes around, which is data rich. Universities are data rich, but information poor. They've got loads and loads of data hanging around in the universities, but they work in silos. And that data isn't integrated, so universities can't use that data. Also, what you've got is IT. IT are not really involved in the strategic decision. IT is seen as the implementers and managing of digital systems. The pandemic has brought IT a little bit more into the senior executive field of view, but it needs to come when you're looking at bringing in IR4 into institutions. It's all data driven and it's digital. The IT department have to be involved. Okay, they're not simple things to fix, but they're things that all universities and institutions will have to start looking at.
Yeah, and I think we'll look at that a little bit too at the end when we talk about culture, because there are sort of the strategies and tactics that need to be put in place to do the right thing at the right time. And then it's a matter of driving that change through the institution, especially if it's a really large institution where not everybody is always in the same meetings. Anthony, people on the attendee side are commenting about how useful the data is that you've shared with us here, and so I wonder if we can connect and share that out to everyone after this, as well as maybe even a little bit of a snippet of what you just shared, because it's obviously informed by really rigorous research. It would be nice to be able to distribute that. We will move on now because we're kind of fighting time a little bit, but let's get into marketing. So Allison, I'm really curious, because you mentioned at Sienna College that you have the strategic plan in place already, and you're really focusing on student experience, which is brilliant, and word of mouth is the best form of marketing. Are there any new audiences that you're pursuing at Sienna that you haven't really focused on before very intentionally? And if so, how are you going after them?
Yes, in the strategic plan, we're looking to add graduate programs that would be appealing to adult learners, because we know that there's growth there, right? It's really, this decline is very focused on the traditionally aged college going students. So we know that we need to diversify our offerings in a way that appeal to more types of college students. So that's in there. And then even among the undergraduate students, we're trying to do that too. I think about before we had a nursing program, we have a high school that's less than a mile from our campus called Shaker High School. And a student that wanted to become a nurse was not in our market until we had a nursing major. We often think about markets in terms of geography, but programs are markets too. So you have to make sure that you're attending to what those in-demand programs are and making sure that as a marketer, you're surfacing that data to the academic side of the house so that they can use that insight as they're developing new programs.
Yeah, I love that. I love the view of programs as markets. And actually somebody from the attendee side commented that if we're looking at graduate programs, even if there's a shift in demographics and there are eventually fewer people in the traditional graduate age group, that the decline might not be as substantial, because as long as there is demand for certain professions, there shouldn't really be a decline in graduate students to the same extent. And I think that is somewhat related to what you just said, is figuring out what are the graduate programs that are really aligned with market demand in our region or with our student population, and how can we scale from that?
Yeah, and things like AI and data science, those are probably going to be the programs that schools need to look at adding, because that's what this next industrial revolution is all about, right?
Yeah. James, what about your messaging at Purdue Northwest? You already mentioned the desire to become a Hispanic serving institution officially. How does that affect your messaging as you're looking towards Latinx populations that maybe, in the past haven't been heavily represented on campus as much, but now becoming more and more to the forefront?
Yeah, that's a great question. In part, our timing was sort of fortunate in that we launched a new brand that's anchored around Power Onward, sort of in 2020. And a big emphasis for that in developing the brand was research with our audience, including first-gen students. And a big emphasis of the brand is sort of a grit and determination, sort of pushing forward. And it's aligned well with our attempts to reach out to the audience that we're looking to communicate with now. One related note I'll share too is that a real strength for Purdue Northwest is that we're a diverse institution. We have a sort of wide-ranging student body with a lot of different backgrounds. And that's something that we're looking at how we authentically communicate it. I think too, it's really important to sort of take that in mind and communicate in a way that feels authentic with the audiences we're trying to reach. And part of the messaging that has been determined as a result of that is we have sort of people in specific roles to communicate with different audiences. We have someone who is sort of our point person for Hispanic serving outreach or for first gen outreach. So I think that we're looking to do it at sort of a deeper level where we connect with the audiences and aren't trying to be sort of glib or superficial, but really build a connection that's enduring in the way we reach out.
Nice. Allison, to just quickly call on you again. I know you mentioned the Sienna Guarantee messaging. Can you touch on that a little bit too?
Yeah, so I think to the point you were just trying to make, right, it needs to be a message that resonates with people. So we offer the Sienna College Guarantee. It includes $57,000 in scholarships at least over your 4 years. Remember, we're talking about traditionally aged undergraduate students, so it makes sense from their perspective. That you will graduate in 4 years, or the college will pay for the rest of your degree. And we also guarantee a career experience, a personalized career experience. So what we're trying to do is touch on the things that matter to the students and sort of package them in a way that resonates. It's a lot harder to talk about those three things if you have to do it over an extended time. So we've kind of bundled them under this concept of the Sienna Guarantee to help just translate it in an easy way to people.
Yeah, thank you. Kristen, I'm curious around the next question, which is, what are some examples of marketing tactics that worked maybe 3 to 5 years ago that were sort of the bread and butter? We already talked about search and how it's unsustainable, and Google costs will just rise to an extent where we have to come up with different tactics. But as a web developer, right, somebody who's working on the web side of things, what are things that used to work, you could bank on that maybe now not so much anymore, and you've had to shift your tactics a little bit?
Well, I will say in my role, I'm not responsible so much for social, but I do know as our whole marketing team that we've done a lot more. Well, one of the things we've done is we've just massively increased the amount of stories that we're publishing. So we have a lot more content that we can share in all of our outlets, and a lot more that creates a lot of dynamics, increased dynamics, I guess, on our web pages. Our primary web pages see a lot more turnover of rich, engaging material. So that's good. And those same stories are getting pushed out on social. And then we do more paid social campaigns than we used to. I feel like that ASU as a whole does a lot. I think they put a lot of ads out there everywhere. I feel like I'm getting bombarded with them all the time, especially ASU Online. I'm sure that Google thinks I'm very interested in ASU since I spend all my time there. But when it comes to, that's mostly what we've been doing. And then paying attention to the data later and really trying to see what was of value and what wasn't, and then trying to increase those places where we saw a little bit of a return in the value.
Awesome. James, I'm just going to have you quickly answer this one as well, because I know you were talking about always on campaigns and how that used to be less necessary. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can just say 3 to 5 years ago, we might have sort of periodic digital advertising campaigns. We might see a need and do something for a couple months. And now we've really shifted to it's too competitive. We have to be present. We have to be out there because we see our competitors are out there. If we're not, sort of like Kristen said, I see not only our ads, but other institutions too. So I think that's a shift that will just continue to grow.
Yeah, that makes sense. Moving on to culture, before we go into our Q&A, we have Kristen and Carrie here from maybe the most innovative institution in higher education in the US. Carrie, do you still find that there are blockers to innovation? What are they, and how are you dealing with them in your school and beyond?
Well, working in an area where you're working with folks in the second oldest profession, or the, how does the phrase go? I'm forgetting off the top of my head now, but it's
law, yeah.
Yeah. So it's law is a very specific genre. There's not a lot of lawyers are trained to look for that wiggle room. So I think it's helping them to look past more of the, well, there's a lot of, one of our top programs is law, science, and innovation. So it's an expectation of how can we look beyond just what we generally think is this neat package of what may be the individual component. So it's part of what it's within our DNA to think past these barriers, and do we still have bureaucratic processes? I think that's more where we could have some more innovation coming to it, but thinking about how can we create something that's of value to our students and presenting that to them in a way that meets them where they are. That's the biggest challenge that I see about a quarter into my new role here, is how can we get more in front of them and share these great programs that we have.
Sabia, what about at American? What has been tried maybe that you've been part of to really come at these challenges, not even just the enrollment cliff, but we just went through COVID, visa issues that you just mentioned, with an entrepreneurial mindset?
I'm going to tell you this. I think this is one of my favorite for last year's all kinds of higher ed conferences, one of my favorite quotes. And it was, I think, from a Utah State that they put it on the screen on the higher ed conference. It was like, anything that's happening higher ed has been in other industry for 5 years now. So higher ed usually is the industry that adopts a new skill or new kind of, any kind of innovation 5 years later than any other industry. This is probably my fourth industry. I come from like, I have done automotive, all kinds of things with higher ed. I'm like, something that they're doing, I would listen to a podcast, which they have been doing for 5 or 6 years now. So I think that's one of the blockers. It's not just AU, it's overall the industry where we should be more proactive than reactive. And I think it's a good thing that we are having more discussions where we are really trying to, get to that mindset where now we have to be collaboratively to try to see what are the things that we can do. Even with the things that worked before, it's not going to work anymore. The drip campaign, sending emails to 500 kids do not work anymore. Let's really try to personalize it, and let's try to see different strategies that would be more personalized and guiding them to be what they want to become. So James and even Anthony brought up a really good point where, analytics, looking at their behavior, studying them, those are the things that would help us really understand what mindset do we need. There is no one size fits all. Something that is working for ASU is not going to work for AU. Let's be honest about it. So really understanding our potential students, something one student I'm fighting for is probably not Carrie fighting for. So what my student wants is something that would tell us after understanding the behavior. So those are the things that I think has been a blocker, I would say, from not just AU, from other red tapes of the industry, where we really need to be more careful about. And because if we want to face this situation in a very, armed and equipped way, I think it's the best way to do it is become that place like, okay, we try to do new things without being a follower. We have to be the leader in this industry.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. We do have one more question, and we have been getting questions in the Q&A, not the chat, but the Q&A box, which we've been answering, some live and some written. So if you attendees have additional questions, please put them in now. And then I would love for everyone to just really briefly answer this last question, because I think a lot of these ideas and the tactics that are already underway at your institutions depend on people who make them happen, right? So I would love to hear from everyone briefly. What advice would you give your industry peers on how to best drive change from within a complex college or university environment? Anthony, would you like to start?
Yeah, basically what I would say is that institutions need to be more entrepreneurial, less academic in their way of thinking. Okay, less traditional. Sorry, somebody's trying to come in.
No worries.
I'll let someone else answer that. What they need to do is look at industry, see what industry wants. Okay, what we're seeing in lots of universities, as a university which I spoke to recently, they're investing £85 million in a project. It's nearly all in infrastructure, in buildings. The future's moving into digital. You need to think strategically and think digital. Don't just think that the university is going to be as it's always been, as I said, since the 1600s. It's going to change, and it's going to change soon. It's going to change big. So if you're looking at investment, start looking towards your digital infrastructure and how you can use and adapt that to give a better personalized service to your students.
Thank you. Love it. Kristen, what about you? What's your advice?
Well, I would agree with a lot of what Anthony said. And I think that is, I don't know, I think that's absolutely true. I thought about this question from more of a personal standpoint, and maybe from a standpoint that I struggle with in my own job, is that, and that is just gather and pay attention to the data. What are the data telling you about what is working and what is not working? And don't continue to do practices that are not working anymore. Always be revising and changing and trying to figure out the evidence-based answers for what you're trying to accomplish. And for me, that's coming out of a lot of data that I try to gather about our communications on the web and in other locations.
Allison, what about you?
I think don't wait for someone else to be the change. You can lead the change. And you can't do it alone, but just find your partners. Who is also a change agent on your campus, at your institution, that you can work with on. I put a call out to create a new kind of marketing plan for Sienna, and I ended up with 13 people, including admissions counselors, financial aid counselors, data people, people from the communications team, people from the student experience team, to help create a student-centered marketing plan. And guess what? In the process of doing that, it changed their daily work and how they chose to make decisions, and how that they interacted and engaged with students by participating. So you can create sort of like organic cultural change if you invite people to be part of it, right? So you don't have to like thrust change on people. We all know how much people hate to change, so don't do that. But how do you create a planning process or some kind of structure that people can be invited into, and then it changes their minds in the process, and then they become change agents too.
I love it. James, what about you?
Yeah, so many great points here. And just to echo what others had said, I'd say own an experiment with what you can control. Maybe you can't touch everything, but there's probably something, like Kristen was saying, that you can manage. And if you own it, you try something different. And honestly, if you sort of write and share your results, I found a lot of power in just writing something and sharing it. You might be able to bring in people, as Allison said, to build towards something better.
Yeah. Carrie.
Well, you all made really great points, so there's not much more else to add except start with micro steps. How can you build slow momentum and continue to showcase folks with your results, building stronger relationships with folks on campus who may or may not have even thought about this in previously. So any progress is good progress.
Love it. Sabia.
Well, I think a lot of it has been said already, but I would say start the conversation. I think a lot of the universities, to be honest, I think a lot of the people I talk to, they haven't even started the conversation. I think being able to really understand the problem is the first step for a solution, right? So if you do understand where the issue is, where you need to focus, that's where you start. And then the strategy comes second. From a marketing perspective, I would say push doesn't work anymore. Let's pull the students. And on higher ed, there has been a lot of pushing all the time, the old school method of like just sending group campaigns and not nurturing them, but really pulling them, doing the secret shopping and how your competitors are doing it, and what worked for them, what worked for you. Those are the things, those study is important. Understanding their behavior, their data, their AIO, their activist interest, opinion as a student, and what they want to become is important. And that will give you a clear picture of what you need to do next. And looking at it from a creative perspective will help you ensure a better future for your institution.
Allison, it sounds like you have another thought you want to get in there.
I just want to say, if all of us stop doing that push thing, that's probably the best thing that we can do to help our colleges. Like stop, because as an industry, we're turning students off. And so if we all stop doing that and find better ways, we're going to help save this industry and help it through what's to come.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. So
that's a really provocative note to end on, for sure. I love it. Thank you all so much for being on this panel. The hour flew by for me. It was incredibly insightful. Really appreciate your time, and everyone who attended this. Thank you so much too for your time and being here today. We will send the recording as well as hopefully some stats that Anthony shared and others. And in terms of continuing the conversation, I know everyone here on the panel is on LinkedIn. Allison, I think, is launching a new podcast, or already has, where many of these topics will come up, and everybody else is doing really great work. So definitely reach out and continue the conversation. And again, thank you so much for being here today. Have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.